President Lee Jae-myung is stepping up efforts to fast-track his 3 flagship mega projects, with the president's office confirming the Honam Semiconductor Cluster will be built on the future site of the Gwangju Military Airport. Korea has officially launched the round-the-clock weekday trading in its foreign exchange market, marking a major step in its push to boost the global competitiveness of the Korean won. All eyes are on Semiconductor Super Week, as Samsung Electronics prepares to report earnings and SK hynix readies its Nasdaq ADR debut, even as investor sentiment remains mixed. President Lee Jae-myung has stressed the importance of speed in carrying out the nation's ambitious investment projects, calling for faster administrative action. And an airbase in the southwestern city of Gwangju has also been chosen as the site for a new chip cluster. Our Yoon Jang-min reports.
Speed will be the key to success amid fierce global competition. That was President Lee Jae-myung at a follow-up meeting on Monday with related agencies and private companies over the chip and AI mega projects announced last week.
누가 얼마나 더 빨리 선점하느냐, 누가 더 빠르냐로 결판이 나는 것 같습니다. 그야말로 오직 속도전이 중요하다 말씀을 다시 한번 드립니다.
The president instructed officials to consider allowing skipping an environmental impact assessment when investors seek to build facilities in an area where an assessment has been already made. He also called for the need to implement administrative procedures simultaneously, not in consecutive order, and to preemptively secure land, power, and water. The government has vowed full support using excess tax revenues recently generated from the chip sector.
이번이 기회입니다. 새로운 대한민국, 신대한민국의 출발점을 우리가 만들어내야 될 것입니다. 우리 앞에 놓인 이런 역사적 과제를 반드시 성공시킬 수 있도록.
On Monday, the Blue House announced that the Gwangju Air Base has been chosen as the site for a new chip cluster in the southwest, saying the location had been favored by companies.
The military airport in Gwangju covers about 8.3 million square meters of land available for use. The land has already been flattened, so the time for construction will be saved.
President Lee will personally preside over monthly meetings on the mega projects, while a dedicated task force will be set up at the presidential office. The president also pushed back against critics, saying it was contradictory to complain about discrimination against other areas over the selection of the investment sites, while claiming that the projects are impossible to be realized. Yoon Jang-min, Arirang News.
Korea has launched around-the-clock weekday trading in its foreign exchange market to boost the global appeal of the local capital market and the Korean won. Our Baek Joo-hee has more.
Korea officially launched the 24-hour foreign exchange trading system on Monday. Previously, $1 trading was strictly limited to just 6.5 hours a day, closing at 3:30 p.m. Under the new system, the trading now runs from 6 a.m. on Monday to 6 a.m. on Saturday, with trading available even on public holidays except for weekends and New Year's Day. On the first day of this new system, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance and Economy Gu Yoon-chol and Deputy Government of the Bank of Korea Kwon Min-soo visited the dealing room to offer encouragement. Minister Gu emphasized that the 24-hour market serves as a launching pad for the won's global leap. He noted the opening reflects strong confidence in Korea's economy, driven by record current account surpluses. The move also meets rising foreign demand ahead of the nation's inclusion in the World Government Bond Index. The government expects this new system to expand the investor base and attract long-term global capital. The system is also expected to enable local exporters to exchange currency in real time, protecting them from overnight financial shocks. Meanwhile, this reform comes as the nation battles persistent high exchange rates. In the second quarter of this year, the average $1 rate topped the 1,500 won mark for the first time since the Asian financial crisis, reaching 1,501.931. However, thin overnight trading volumes could spark initial volatility before the system fully stabilizes.
as the 24-hour market creates an environment where foreign capital flows and currency conversions can occur without limits, it appears highly likely that market volatility could increase significantly.
In response, Bank of Korea Deputy Governor Kwon pledged to strictly monitor the market around the clock and supply liquidity if necessary. To make local trading even easier for foreign markets, the government will introduce an offshore won settlement system by January 2027, so international banks can transfer the Korean won overseas. 백주희, Arirang News.
It's a crucial week for the semiconductor industry. Samsung Electronics is set to release its second quarter preliminary earnings, while SK hynix prepares for its upcoming U.S. listing. Lee Ju-yeon has the details.
After weeks of volatility in global chip stocks, attention is turning to a series of major events this week that could prove pivotal for Korea's semiconductor industry. Samsung Electronics is set to announce its second quarter preliminary earnings on Tuesday. Later in the week, SK hynix will list its American Depository Receipts, or ADRs, in the U.S. on Friday, giving American investors easier access to the Korean chipmaker's shares. Taiwan's TSMC will also release its June revenue figures the same day. Samsung Electronics, the world's largest memory chip maker, is expected to report one of its strongest quarterly performances, supported by solid growth in its semiconductor business. According to market consensus, Samsung Electronics is expected to report an operating profit of about $56.4 billion, or 86 trillion Korean won for April to June quarter when it announces preliminary earnings on Tuesday. That will be well above its first quarter operating profit of roughly $37 billion, or 57.2 trillion won. On Friday, SK hynix will begin trading its American Depository Receipts, or ADRs, on the Nasdaq in a listing expected to raise up to $29 billion, or around 44 trillion Korean won. Although SK hynix is a major player in the high bandwidth memory, or HBM, market, its shares have so far been traded only in Korea, meaning overseas investors have had to trade during Korean market hours and deal with foreign exchange cost. The Nasdaq ADR listing is expected to address these challenges by making the stock more accessible to global investors. Meanwhile, the week's major chip-related events extend beyond Korea. Taiwan's TSMC is scheduled to release its June revenue figures on Friday, offering another important gauge of global semiconductor demand. Ahead of a key week for the semiconductor industry, Korea's benchmark KOSPI fluctuated around the 8,000 mark during Monday's trading session. The market closed at 8,051 as Samsung Electronics gained while SK hynix fell, leaving the two chip giants moving in opposite direction. Lee Ju-yeon, Arirang News.
The Yi administration's AI-driven industrial agenda is gaining traction as the government and the ruling party move to coordinate funding, legislation, and follow-up measures. Our Moon Hae-ryun tells us more.
Korea's government and ruling Democratic Party agreed on Sunday to fast-track legislation and funding for President Lee Jae-myung's flagship 3 mega projects, underscoring a coordinated push to accelerate one of the administration's signature economic initiatives. The high-level consultation brought together Prime Minister Han Song-suk, DP Acting Chairman Han Byung-do, and Presidential Chief of Staff Kang Won-sik to discuss follow-up measures for the projects that aim to boost long-term growth through large-scale investments in semiconductors, AI data centers, and physical AI, with an emphasis on regional development. The ruling party pledged to prioritize related legislation in the National Assembly, saying it would support the projects through a dedicated task force while working with the government to secure the bills and budget needed to keep implementation on schedule.
A good plan is hard to turn into results if the investment timing is missed. The party and government must pour all their capacity into realizing the mega projects early.
During the meeting, Kang also unveiled plans for a new Future Response Fund, which will use extra tax revenue from the semiconductor boom to help finance the mega projects and support housing, jobs, and startups for Koreans in their 20s and 30s. The government also pledged full support for the AI data centers on power, land and permitting, including plans to expand power infrastructure and secure a stable water supply for the semiconductor plants and data centers. Prime Minister Han, attending her first such meeting since taking office, called the projects a turning point for the economy.
Just as highways and high-speed networks once drove our economy's rapid growth, this can open a new era of growth for Korea.
The agreement came ahead of President Lee's review of the projects with senior government officials and executives from Samsung Electronics and SK hynix, focused on assessing implementation and ways to accelerate the initiative. Unhaeryun, Arirang News.
Even as Korea's industrial and service sectors grew, many restaurants, hotels, and self-employed workers continue to face headwinds. Data from the Ministry of Data and Statistics shows output in the accommodation and food service sectors rose just 0.9% in the first 5 months of the year, well above the broader service sectors. 4.2% growth. Now, with inflation and high borrowing costs weighing on the outlook, self-employed debts hit a record 1.1 quadrillion won in the first quarter, prompting the Bank of Korea to call for close monitoring. Starting Monday, today, stricter identity verification will be required for new mobile subscriptions and number transfers. According to the Ministry of Science and ICT, customers must verify their identity using facial recognition, a mobile ID, or a same-day resident registration certificate, replacing the previous ID card-only system. Now, the measure aims to prevent crimes such as voice phishing by cracking down on illegal mobile phone registrations through identity theft. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO Summit, will be held in Ankara, Türkiye this Tuesday. Amid growing tensions between the U.S. and its European allies, the alliance's unity will be put to the test. Our Hong Seo-jang reports.
Leaders from NATO's 32 member states will gather in the capital of Türkiye this week to discuss key issues, including defense spending and the Ukraine war against Russia. The White House says U.S. President Donald Trump will arrive on Tuesday and is scheduled to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Wednesday. Growing tensions between the U.S. and its NATO allies have fueled concerns over Washington's commitment to the alliance, casting doubts on what the summit can ultimately achieve.
I just want loyalty. You know, we're so loyal to them. We're always fighting for them. We have thousands of troops all over Europe. In Germany, we have 50,000 troops.
According to a U.S. official familiar with the matter, AP reports that Trump and Zelensky's discussion on Wednesday will address efforts to end the war in Ukraine. Following the meeting, Trump is expected to speak with Russian President Vladimir Putin to explore a possible path toward achieving peace. Another key issue on the agenda is defense spending. Washington has repeatedly criticized European allies for failing to meet NATO's defense spending target. However, the European allies have pushed back, pointing to what they call the Trump trillion, a chart showing that NATO allies and Canada have committed more than $1.2 trillion in additional defense spending since 2017. Tensions within the alliance have deepened further as the European members have been reluctant to back the United States during the recent U.S.-Iran conflict. In response, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has highlighted Europe's growing contribution to the alliance, with a backlog of more than $300 billion in defense orders and as many as 5,000 U.S. military aircraft operating from bases in Europe ahead of the ceasefire in April. Still, Trump has repeatedly threatened to withdraw the U.S. from NATO and reduce the number of American troops and military assets stationed in Europe, raising questions about the alliance's unity. With key issues such as defense spending and the war in Ukraine high on the agenda, this year's NATO Summit is expected to put the alliance's unity to the test. Hong Seo-jang, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, in Iran, funeral prayers for the country's late Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei were held in Tehran over the weekend, drawing millions of mourners and senior government officials. Our Jung Hae-rim has more.
Millions of mourners have gathered in Tehran for funeral ceremonies, honoring Iran's late Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and members of his family. Funeral prayers were held Sunday with senior political and military officials in attendance. Three of Khamenei's sons, Masoud, Mustafa, and Meysam, also appeared publicly for the first time since the outbreak of the war. However, his other son, Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, was absent, having not been seen in public since being appointed in early March. Reports have suggested that he may have been wounded in the February U.S.-Israeli airstrike that killed his father, although Iranian authorities have not publicly confirmed those claims. His continued absence also comes amid security concerns that Israel could target Iran's new leadership. Mourners dressed in black filled the religious complex, carrying portraits of Khamenei and Iranian flags. Crowds were heard chanting anti-U.S. and anti-Israel slogans, while some banners called for retaliation against U.S. President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Authorities had declared Sunday a public holiday and imposed heightened security measures around the capital. Iranian officials say between 12 million and 20 million people could attend the ceremonies nationwide, describing the event as the, quote, funeral of the century. Officials also warned of possible crowd crushes, and as temperatures rose during the funeral, mourners were sprayed with water to keep cool. A major procession is scheduled to move through Tehran on Monday before the ceremonies continue in Qom on Tuesday and other cities through Thursday. The late leader is expected to be buried on Thursday in Mashhad. 정혜림, Arirang News.
Seaweed farms in Wando are drawing global attention, with international delegations visiting as Korea's seaweed farming expertise gains worldwide recognition. Cha Yoon-kyung has the story.
The value of the seaweed farms in Wando-gun County, Jeollanam-do province, has been highly recognized by both U.S. NASA and CNN. Specialists dispatched by the UN and the World Bank visited the pristine waters of Wando-gun County for an on-the-spot study, seeking ways to transfer aquaculture technologies to developing nations.
In this moment today, we're here in Wando County to really observe and to learn from how the county has invested and developed its seaweed sector.
Ahead of this, a delegation from the World Wildlife Fund, a leading non-profit environmental organization, returned to Wando-gun County following their visit last year. The delegation showed great interest in the close cooperation among the local government, fishermen, and fishing village communities.
As you look over your term as mayor, what have been some of the changes that you've seen in the seaweed industry for Wando?
Wando, which accounts for about half of South Korea's total seaweed production, recently held the 2026 Pre-Wando International Seaweed Exhibition at Wando Beach Park from May 2nd to 7th, drawing a huge success with around 170,000 visitors. Wando-gun County is actively nurturing seaweed, moving beyond its traditional role as a food source into a future strategic industry that encompasses biomaterials and marine healing. Cha Yoon-kyung, Arirang News.
South Korea welcomed more than 200,000 cruise visitors back in May, setting a new monthly record for cruise arrivals. According to the Korea Tourism Organization on Monday, the number of people arriving on cruise ships reached 206,542 in May, which is up 13.4% from the previous month and 12.2% from a year earlier. Now, the January to May total climbed to 709,000, putting South Korea on track to surpass the record annual figure of 1.6 million cruise visitors set back in 2025. Now, by port, Seogwipo Port reached the most arrivals, followed by Busan Port and Incheon Port, while visitors from China made up over 45% of the total. Museum goods from the National Museum of Korea, branded as Mutes products, saw record sales in the first half of the year. From January to June, sales revenue from Mutes products exceeded 20 billion Korean won, or about $14.2 million. The figure was up about 90% from the previous period, from the same period last year. Now, among Mute's products, items inspired by the Pangasayusang Buddhist statue stood out, with 12,000 units sold this year and cumulative sales are reaching 60,000. The product gained public attention after BTS member RM said he owned one, and after President Lee Jae-myung was photographed with it when he visited the National Museum.
This is the world now. OPEC Plus approved further production increases on Sunday, raising output targets by 188,000 barrels daily beginning in August. The group has now increased quotas for 4 consecutive months as part of a plan to unwind production cuts agreed in 2023. Iraq has signaled it wants higher quotas, and the United Arab Emirates left the group earlier this year to give it more flexibility over production. Meanwhile, oil prices have fallen to $72 per barrel, down from peaks above $120 as tanker traffic has resumed in the Strait of Hormuz. Lower demand from China and a coordinated global strategic reserve release have also contributed to lower prices. Venezuela reported on Sunday evening that the death toll from the twin earthquakes on June 24th has reached 3,342, with a further 16,700 injured. According to official figures, more than 16,000 people are homeless. An unofficial count lists 41,000 people as missing. The government has deployed nearly 30,000 officials alongside 3,281 international rescue workers. The United Nations and other organizations warned the final death toll could exceed 10,000 given the scale of the disaster. Heavy rains have killed 5 people across northern China. Chinese state media reported on Sunday that 2 people died in a flash flood in Inner Mongolia while herding cattle on Saturday evening, and 3 others died in Liaoning Province's Pusan city after a rainstorm dropped nearly 33 centimeters of rain in one area. Meanwhile, tropical storm Maisak hit Vietnam's Quang Ninh province with winds of 101 kilometers per hour before moving inland into southern China's Guangxi province. Flooding from the storm submerged cars and required rescue crews to use inflatable boats. Local residents said the flooding was the most severe in 2 decades. Wildfires are burning in 6 countries in southern Europe. One fire in Portugal has burned 12,000 hectares since Thursday, with more than 1,200 firefighters and 15 aircraft deployed to fight it. A fire near Girona in Spain has forced nearly 50,000 residents to evacuate, and Greece has reported major fires west of Athens and near Thessaloniki in southern France. A fire in the Pyrenees has an 18-kilometer front line, with France mobilizing 750 firefighters and 9 water-bombing aircraft. Authorities there said the fire could affect Monday's Tour de France 3rd stage. Chu Ji-han, Arirang News.
Rain has been coming and going across much of the country today. And as muggy weather continues, heat advisories are in effect for parts of the Gyeongsang-do provinces and Jeju Island. Meanwhile, more rain is on the way nationwide through Wednesday. The heaviest rainfall will likely target northern Gyeonggi-do and northern Gangwon-do provinces, where some places could see more than 100 millimeters of rain. Then by Thursday, the rain will mainly linger across the central regions. Typhoon Bobby, the 9th named storm of the season, is strengthening over waters near Guam and continues to move north. There is still a chance it could affect Korea, so be sure to keep an eye on the latest forecast. Tomorrow, Seoul will start the day at 24 degrees, Chuncheon 22, Busan 23 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 30 degrees, Daegu 33, Jeju 31 degrees. Looking ahead, we're in for a week of rain and muggy weather. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
That's all for now. I'm Kim Dami. Arirang News will be back at 8 p.m. Korea time. Until then, goodbye.